I almost walked out of that bar without ever talking to her, and sometimes I think about how different everything would be if I had. My name is Ryan Carter. I am 27 years old, and I live a pretty average life in Seattle. I work as a sales representative for a mid-sized tech company, the kind of job where your days blur together with calls, emails, and numbers that never really mean much once you close your laptop. I ride the light rail every morning, grab the same drip coffee from the same corner shop, and head back to my small one-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill every night. I am not lonely, but I am not exactly fulfilled either. I exist somewhere in the middle. That night was our company Christmas party. It was held at a trendy downtown bar with exposed brick walls and soft lights shaped like snowflakes. Music played loud enough to drown out real conversations, and everyone was already a few drinks in by the time I arrived. I did what I always do. I stood near the edge of the room, smiled when someone talked to me, laughed at jokes that were not that funny, and checked my phone like I had somewhere important to be. I did not. I was planning to leave early, go home, order Thai food, and call it a night. I had my coat in my hand when I saw her. Sophie Turner from the IT department was sitting alone at the bar. Her head was resting on her arms, and her dark hair spilled across the counter like she had given up holding herself together. She looked different than she did at work. Softer, sadder, and completely worn down. We were not close. We were coworkers who nodded in hallways and complained about meetings. That was it. But something about the way she looked stopped me. The room was clearing out fast. People were laughing their way toward the door, calling rides, wishing each other happy holidays. No one was paying attention to Sophie. I told myself to leave. She was an adult. She would figure it out. But I remembered nights when I had sat alone after my grandfather died, wishing someone would just ask if I was okay. That memory turned me around. I walked back to the bar and gently touched her shoulder. I asked if she was all right. She lifted her head slowly, eyes red and unfocused, and tried to smile. She said she was fine, just tired. When she stood up, her knees nearly gave out. I caught her without thinking. She dropped her phone on the floor and started crying right there in front of me. Not loud. Just quiet sobs that felt heavier than yelling ever could. That was the moment I knew I was not leaving. I told her I would drive her home. She protested at first, embarrassed, apologizing over and over. But I could see the relief in her eyes when she finally nodded. Outside, the air was cold and sharp, and light snow was starting to fall. Seattle looked peaceful, like it was holding its breath. The drive was quiet at first. Soft music played on the radio, and Sophie stared out the window like she was watching memories instead of streets. Then she started talking. About work, about being tired, about how everything felt hard all the time. Her voice broke at a red light, and she cried again. I did not try to fix it, I just listened. When we pulled up to her house, I saw warm yellow light glowing from the windows. It looked like a place where someone waited for you. Sophie leaned heavily on me as we walked to the door, fumbling with her keys. I rang the bell instead. The door opened and her mother stood there. She looked at Sophie and gasped, pulling her into a hug before turning to me with tears in her eyes. She thanked me again and again, her voice shaking with relief. The house smelled like cinnamon and warmth. A Christmas tree glowed softly in the corner. We helped Sophie onto the couch, and she fell asleep almost instantly. I turned toward the door, ready to leave, but her mother touched my arm. She looked at me gently and said, "Would you like to stay over for a bit?" Quote, I did not know it then, but that simple question was about to change everything. I hesitated when her mother asked me to stay. It was late, and I had every practical reason to say no. I barely knew them. Sophie was asleep on the couch, her breathing slow and uneven. And this had started as nothing more than a ride home. But there was something in her mother's eyes, a mix of worry and gratitude, that made walking away feel wrong. So I nodded and followed her into the kitchen. The house was quiet in that late-night way, the kind where every small sound feels louder than it should. A wall clock ticked steadily, and the faint hum of the refrigerator filled the pauses. The kitchen was small but warm, with a wooden table pushed against the wall and the smell of cinnamon still hanging in the air. She poured 2 mugs of coffee from a pot that was already on, like she had been waiting for company without realizing it. She introduced herself as Ellen. Her hands trembled slightly as she set the mug in front of me. I told her my name again, where I worked, how Sophie and I knew each other. Simple things. Safe things. For a moment, we just sat there, steam rising between us, both of us listening for any sound from the living room. "She's been having a hard time," Ellen said quietly, her eyes drifting toward the couch where her daughter slept, harder than she lets on. I nodded, unsure what to say. It felt like I had already seen too much, crossed a line I did not even know existed. But Ellen kept talking, like once the door was open, the words could not be held back anymore. She told me Sophie's father had passed away 2 months earlier. A heart attack, sudden. Right on the front porch, Sophie had found him, tried to save him, called for help. None of it mattered in the end. Ellen's voice did not break, but the pain sat heavy in every word. As she spoke, things started to make sense. The tired eyes at work. The way Sophie stayed late every night. The forced smiles. The drinking. I felt a knot form in my chest as I listened. "I worry about her all the time," Ellen said. "She says she's fine, but I know she's not. She doesn't talk about it. She just carries it alone." I told her about my grandfather, about how he died slowly from cancer, and how helpless I had felt watching it happen. How grief does not disappear just because time moves forward. Ellen reached across the table and placed her hand over mine for a brief moment. It was not romantic or awkward. It was human. "You understand more than most," she said softly. We talked for a long time after that. About loss, about fear, about how quiet a house can become after someone is gone. When I finally stood to leave, Ellen hugged me like she had known me for years. Outside, the snow had picked up, covering the street in white. I drove home feeling heavier and lighter at the same time. The next day at work felt strange. People laughed about the party, shared blurry photos, complained about hangovers. Sophie's desk was empty. She had taken the day off. No one asked why. I thought about texting her all morning and talked myself out of it just as many times. I did not want to embarrass her or make things awkward. In the end, I sent a simple message. I hoped she was feeling better. I told her there was no pressure to reply. She answered that afternoon. Just 2 lines. "Thank you for last night. I really mean it." I stared at my phone longer than I should have, reading the words over and over. The following day, she was back at work. She looked put together but tired. When she passed my desk, our eyes met, and she paused. Her hands fidgeted nervously as she spoke. "My mom wanted to know if you'd like to come over for dinner tonight," she said. "She wants to thank you, and I'd like to talk too, if that's okay." I was surprised, but I said yes. That evening, I stood on the same porch again, holding a small bottle of wine I had picked up on the way. The house felt different in daylight, less fragile, more lived in. Dinner was simple and warm, and for the first time since I had met her, Sophie talked openly. About her dad, about the guilt, about the nights she could not sleep. Later, we sat on the porch together, the air cold and clear. She told me she felt like she was drowning most days, that sometimes she thought about giving up but could not do that to her mother. I listened. I did not interrupt. When she finished, I told her she did not have to carry it alone. She leaned against me for a moment, and in that quiet space, something shifted. Not romance, not yet. Something deeper. A shared understanding. A promise without words. As I drove home that night, I realized this was no longer just about one night or one ride home. I had stepped into something real. And whether I was ready or not, I knew I was not walking away. After that night, things between Sophie and me changed in small, quiet ways. Nothing dramatic happened all at once. There were no big confessions or sudden moments that turned everything upside down. Instead, it was the little things that started to matter. The way she smiled more easily when she passed my desk. The way she started joining group lunches again instead of eating alone. The way her eyes, though still tired, no longer looked completely empty. I gave her space. I did not want to be another person hovering over her, treating her like she might break. We talked sometimes after work, short walks around the block, or quick coffee stops, when the day felt especially heavy. She never forced the conversation toward her grief, but when it came up, she did not shut it down either. She talked about her dad in pieces, like she was testing how much she could say without falling apart. One evening, she asked if I wanted to grab a drink after work. We went to a quiet pub a few blocks away, the kind of place where the booths were worn and the music was low enough to actually hear each other. Halfway through our beers, she slid a folded paper across the table toward me. It was an application for a grief support group. She told me she had filled it out 3 times and thrown it away 3 times. She said she was tired of pretending she was fine. I told her how proud I was of her for even considering it. She looked at me like that was exactly what she needed to hear. From there, we fell into a rhythm. She started attending the group once a week. Sometimes she came back exhausted, emotionally drained, but lighter somehow. Other times she came back quiet, processing everything she had heard. I listened when she wanted to talk and stayed silent when she did not. I spent more time at her house too, helping her mom with small things around the place, fixing a loose cabinet door, carrying boxes from the garage. Ellen started treating me like family, sending me home with leftovers and checking in on me the way mothers do. The house on Maple Street no longer felt heavy. It felt healing. One Saturday morning, Sophie texted me and asked if I wanted to go fishing with her. She said it was something her dad used to love. We drove out to the lake together, the road winding through tall trees just starting to turn green again. On the water, she looked peaceful in a way I had not seen before. She caught a small fish, laughed like a kid, and let it go with a smile that felt real. On the drive home, she told me she felt like she could finally breathe again. She thanked me for staying. Not just that night, but every day after. I told her she did not owe me anything. I stayed because I wanted to. Somewhere along the way, my feelings shifted. I started noticing the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous, the way her voice softened when she trusted someone. I did not rush it. I did not want to be another complicated thing in her life, but the connection was there, growing quietly. One night, during a rough anniversary week, she called me and asked if I could come over. We sat on the living room floor with takeout containers between us and the lights low. She cried. I listened. Ellen joined us, and the 3 of us sat together without trying to fix anything. As I drove home later, I realized how much this had changed me too. I was no longer just going through the motions of my life. I was present. I was needed. And in helping her heal, I had started healing parts of myself I did not even realize were broken. Whatever this was between us, I knew one thing for sure. It was real. And it was leading us somewhere neither of us had planned, but both of us were ready to face. By the time spring settled in, it felt like we had both survived something together. Not in a loud or dramatic way, but in the quiet way that really changes you. Sophie was not suddenly healed, and neither was I, but life had color again. Real color. The kind you notice when you are no longer just existing. She kept going to the support group. At first, she only listened. Then, one night, she spoke. She told me later that her hands had shaken the whole time, but when she finished, the room stayed quiet in a way that felt respectful, not awkward. People understood her. That mattered more than she expected. She came home that night exhausted and proud, and I could see it in her eyes. Work changed too. We were still professional, still careful, but there was an ease between us now. Shared glances during meetings, inside jokes whispered near the coffee machine, a comfort in knowing someone had your back. We did not rush anything. Neither of us wanted to cheapen what we had built. Ellen watched all of this quietly. One evening, as Sophie stepped outside to take a call, Ellen looked at me and said, "You didn't save her. You just stayed." And that made all the difference. I carried those words with me long after. Sophie's birthday came in late spring. Nothing big, just a small gathering in the backyard with string lights and simple food. I gave her a framed photo from our fishing trip, the lake calm behind us. On the back, I had written one sentence. Sometimes, all someone needs is for one person to stay. When she read it, she cried and laughed at the same time, then hugged me longer than usual. That night, after everyone left, we sat on the porch again. Same steps where we had first talked, same quiet street, but everything felt different. She looked at me and said she was scared. Not of grief anymore, but of feeling something good and losing it. I told her I was scared too, of getting close, of risking my heart. We sat with that honesty between us. She reached for my hand first. There was no rush, no dramatic kiss, just her head resting on my shoulder and my arm around her, both of us breathing in sync. It felt right, earned. Over the months that followed, we grew into whatever this was. Slowly, carefully. Some days we were just friends. Other days, something more. We let it change naturally, without pressure. When grief came back, I stayed. When doubt crept in, she stayed. We chose each other in the small moments. Looking back now, it amazes me how one simple decision changed everything. I almost walked out of that bar, almost went home to a quiet apartment and a forgettable night. Instead, I stayed, I listened, I showed up. And in doing so, I found connection, purpose, and a kind of love that does not demand perfection, just presence. Sometimes life does not change with grand gestures. Sometimes it changes when you knock on a door, accept a cup of coffee, and choose not to leave.